Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome to episode 143. Man, it's been a long run. It's like, God, it's got to have been 2 or 3 years now. And the most amazing part is we're still doing this. We haven't passed out, and we're back for entertainment each year. Or each week? Each year? I don't know. We do a show every week, don't we? I think we do.
We usually do, but I mean, this has been one of the first ones where you gave us a nice, I guess, was it a song in German? I wasn't quite sure. Maybe you were just clearing your throat.
I don't know.
Not positive. I can't remember who said it. It said that some of the German languages it has all of the romance of lung cancer. I think it might have been Henry Rollins. I digress. Some of those languages are pretty impressive when it comes to doing something like their operas and stuff. But man, you've been clearing out some pretty good lung butter there for the start of the show.
Yeah, we have a you know how it is. I have the
You're prepping for legalized
legalized marijuana. There you go. Yeah, that's kind of how it is. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's just, some days it's worse than others. The allergies are gone crazy all of a sudden. So I don't know.
People are getting sick lately. Everybody I know is like, my wife's got a cold. I've been hearing people that are like catching these weird end of the summer colds. I don't know. The only thing I've been doing is getting carried away by mosquitoes.
That's true. Well, tonight we have a special guest joining us. We have an old podcasting friend that runs a YouTube show and a podcast. I think he still does both. We can ask him in a second. Called Zachrilegecast. So without further ado, please welcome to the show, Zach Law. How are you tonight, sir?
Well, I'm just glad you didn't focus too much on the word old. I had you on for, I think it was episode 53, and I'm recording episode 160 tomorrow. So yeah, it's been a minute. I wanted to honor the finest Michigan water by having a Michigan beer tonight. So I'm having a backwoods bastard from Founders.
Oh wow, you are definitely going hardcore. That's like a 9%er.
It's pretty heavy, yeah. I know what it is about barrel aged stouts from Michigan, but I'm a fan.
Well, as far as I know, they only sell those in 4-packs. That's how strong they are.
That's right, yeah. I like the 4-packs because they do the bombers and the 4-packs, and a bomber can be a chore.
It can.
Kind of like a podcast.
Except for you, do you have more fun doing the podcast than drinking the bomber, or vice versa? That's a bigger question.
Well, I mean, I do. You two actually like talk about stories and research and stuff. I just have people on and ask them questions, and then they talk most of the time. So I'm free to drink the whole time. It's perfectly great.
That's cool. And it's kind of funny. You had a show that was called Episode with a Zero, and I think that's like one of the best titles I've ever heard. Like, I just love that title for that show.
Yeah, I think that was 150, and it was just a ramble. There's some episodes that are ramble. Some where I actually have guests on and we actually ask real questions, but kind of keep it loose. I don't know if it's really changed a ton in format since the original episodes. Just now it's podcast and YouTube. The YouTube part was just really, it's easier to record that way.
That is actually very true. The YouTube, we upload it to YouTube and then we don't monitor it. We don't even care. I guess we should say we don't care but YouTube, it was easy to record all of it if you did video. And then when we quit doing video, it was so much easier to record the podcast and then release it to YouTube.
Well, if you're editing too, like if you're doing just the podcast and releasing the audio on YouTube, that's a different story. But like if you're doing the video and there's like commercials and segues and all that kind of stuff, like what we used to do when we did YouTube videos was like editing and intros. I mean, that was an insane amount of work.
Yeah, I've kind of changed a little bit. Like initially I just said, all right, I'm going to do an hour show and it's all going to be live and whatever happens, happens. And then I thought, well, maybe my guest doesn't want to listen to me do my intro outro part. So now I just have the guest on to do an interview and that part's 45 minutes usually. And then it depends on how I'm feeling, if I want to promo another show or, talk about a certain subject, I can do that. But it's usually not much longer than that. If I want to ramble, I'll do my own show, which I guess I'll be talking about tonight.
I guess I'll jump in. That's pretty sweet, though. I mean, the one thing that I was always curious about is like, what got you started in it? Because like some people, like Chris had like this huge battle on a war horse on his back that he was like ready to fight the system, and I was just kind of new into the whole non-believer thing, and so you were just always kind of sort of like this, and you were like, hey, everybody's doing this kind of thing, maybe I should do a little bit of it too? Or was this like a new I guess the atheist and non-believer community format interview show? Was that something that you just said, I want to do this too?
Well, I feel like a lot of shows came up in that 2014 era. Like I listened to, it was like the first Reason Con that No Religion Required Bobby did because he was the only sober person at the conference. And I thought, that's interesting. So I started listening to the shows, and then I got to be on Barroom Atheist in like November of that year. And I had already been doing an interview series with fantasy football people. And I thought, well, I could do this with atheist podcasts. And the initial idea was just to talk about shows I listened to. And then Bobby from No Religion Required was like, well, why don't you just interview me? And I'm like, okay, that was a lot better and more interesting. And started with him. And now, tomorrow we'll be doing episode 160. So it's like 3.5 years, and it's just kind of my 1 hour. And I can't even say I rant necessarily because I kind of want my guests to rant more than me. The less I talk, the better sometimes.
I don't know about that. I think you have some interesting things to say. You definitely have an interesting story for the first segment we have on tonight.
I know you guys do segments. You're so popular and so professional.
We're definitely not popular. We might be somewhat professional. I don't know if I would call us super professional.
It depends on how hard Chris hits the hooch. If at the end of the episode it'll go completely unprofessional. I'm not one for swearing a whole lot. I get them in there here and there. In my real life, I swear a lot more, but on the show I try to keep it and so we can share it out and get it to more people. But every once in a while we got to put the explicit tag on there because it's just gonna hit the fan.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is you could tell how drunk I am sometimes. It's based on when we get towards the end of the episode, and Hannah has to like correct me like my language a couple times more than usual. Usually I can't pronounce big words anyway, but sometimes it's just kind of like, yeah, I'm not even gonna try that. Just pronounce it for me.
Yeah, the science segment at the end of the episode gets a little rough, but okay. So Zach has an interesting story for our first topic.
Yes. We wanted to talk about 9/11 a little bit. Right? And everybody has their 9/11 story. I think everybody on the show so far is in their 30s at least. So we all have some sort of a 9/11 story. And I think last year I told mine, and mine's not super interesting. There's nothing super fancy. I do remember gas going up off the charts and about having a heart attack. Because it was like, before it was 99 cents a gallon, and then all of a sudden it went up to like $3.50 a gallon. You're like, holy crap, But Zach actually has an interesting story that relates similar to what happened to him around 9/11.
Oh, you may have to tell it? Dang.
Well, you got to tell it. Yeah, I'm not going to tell your story. I mean, that seems a little silly.
Well, I guess I can do a somewhat shortened version of it because I did a storytelling class last year, and the whole idea was storytelling. It's not really stand-up because you're not necessarily telling jokes. You're just telling a story, and you're not really memorizing it. You just have an idea of how it's going to go. So I started the story by saying my mom and I were in a room together, and she said to me, let's do something normal together. So she had the remote, and I was laying down on a hospital bed in Emory University. I had sweated through the sheets multiple times in the night because I had just gotten over a medically induced coma. And so it seemed like a perfectly natural thing to do, to watch morning TV. So my mom turned on the TV, and we saw a plane fly into a building. So that was my 9/11. And because I had just come out of a medically induced coma, had a lot of crazy visions and dreams and hallucinations, I had to repeatedly ask people if what was happening was really happening. Because my sense of reality was definitely askew, and then everybody else kind of caught up with me that day.
So basically, when you were in the under the anesthesia or whatever, you actually had enough brain function that you were dreaming about things?
Well, I really think it happened not when I was out, but when they were trying to get me out. Because they have to, it's a pretty strong drug that they give you to get out of a medically induced coma. And it was just because I had a staph infection, I had blood clots, it was going to my lungs, I couldn't breathe, so I needed machines to breathe for me. And then they were getting me out, and I was acting crazy, and I was like throwing my clothes off in front of people, and the doctors were saying, hey, we should put him back under. And my parents were like, actually, that's the way he acted like when he was a little kid. I was just reverting. And so they got me out, and it really was, I don't know, I think it was about a week, maybe a week and a half after I came out that 9/11 happened, but I was still having these nightmares and sweating through the sheets. And you think like you're in a hospital and everything's taken care of, but it's like my parents were changing sheets for me. They were getting me little cups of cranberry juice to drink because they wouldn't let me drink water because I need calories because I had lost like 40 pounds.
Holy crap.
And I was pretty emaciated at the time. Like a feeding tube just kind of keeps you alive. It's not exactly fattening you up. So I just remember, and to this day, I still don't like cranberry juice because I had to drink it constantly and it just doesn't taste good. Oh, it's good for your health, whatever. I'm like, no, not really a fan. And it was just a crazy day because I had to get a PICC line inserted, and that's just kind of like a permanent IV because I needed antibiotics. I mean, I was on antibiotics and blood thinners for like 6 months. And one of the antibiotics gave me anemia and almost killed me a second time. And I had to take blood thinners. And after the initial blood thinner, which is a pill, didn't work, they were like, well, you have to take a shot to the stomach. And before this whole thing happened, I was scared of needles. I think one of the reasons why I got sick is before this happened, because I had a staph infection. I went to see the doctor, but I was so afraid of needles, they couldn't draw blood. So I just think they weren't able to catch it in advance. And after the fact, I was like, I can't give myself a shot to the stomach twice a day. They're like, well, you want to leave the hospital? Okay. It was really weird to do that. You have to do it in the fatty tissue. So it's in your stomach and you're all beat up and bruised and you have this big container full of needles in your room. But yeah, my parents both drove down the day I went to the hospital. And as soon as they arrived, I had to have surgery because I had a abscess of staph infection in my back and it had to be removed. And after a while I couldn't breathe. So they put me on, and my parents basically lived with me for like a month after I got out. And eventually I told them it was time to go, which meant I was healthy. And I got over it and lived happily ever after. And then last year, my wife was like, hey, let's take a storytelling class. And I thought, beginning and end, I had a good story. And my story of hospitalization was the one that I did at the end. And the leader of the class knew the editor at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who does a personal journey series, which is like these long form pieces. And she's like, hey, do you want to write this? And I looked at all the other people who had written them, and they were like New York Times bestsellers. And it's like,
you're like,
sure.
Hey, maybe I get famous from this.
But because of when this happened in 2001, I have like notes and notebooks and stuff, but I hadn't written about it in a long time. And I thought, how about I just go beginning to end, vomit it out, as they say, and just get it out. And then, write different sections as they recommend. And then we went back and forth, and it took a few months. And it was weird because a photographer came over, and it's such a different era. I went to journalism school at the days of like dial-up, but now they bring over a photographer, and they're basically video recording you and taking random pictures of me. There's a picture of me holding a container of mustard, and then that ended up being used. And it was like me trying to look stoic but not mean or something in my backyard while I was getting photographed. It was very strange. And there's a little video segment as well included in an article. And I had a bunch of old pictures and like the notebook that people wrote in, because I mentioned in the story that I'm an unreliable narrator, because for those 3 weeks that I'm out, I can't get those memories back. They don't exist. So I have to depend on other people to tell me what happened. So that's the best I can do for that period of my life. And then to just kind of, one aspect of putting you in a coma is the fact that the drugs they give you erase the memory of you going into the hospital. So I actually have a line that I say, I didn't think it was this bad. Well, I don't remember saying it. I had to have somebody tell me I said that because I don't remember. I remember calling my company, going on short-term disability, and I don't even remember driving home. And all of a sudden I'm having, crazy dreams where like Kevin Smith is like giving me bad food, and that's why I'm throwing up all the time, and just crazy because I was having hallucinations. And it took a while to really make sense of what happened. But yeah, eventually I recovered, and I don't know, I guess lived happily ever after. It's 17 years now.
Yeah. And
wow.
and that's crazy, because here I was just upset because I couldn't go to a Tool concert. You're in the hospital getting surgery and coming out of a medically induced coma. So your story definitely tops my 9/11 story. But what's really interesting too, and kind of what's neat is all of us get to have these stories. And tonight it was kind of funny because my son was like, "Hey, I wasn't even born then," and it's like, "Yeah, you weren't." But do you understand that the effects of what had happened back then are affecting you now, or they're going to? I guess you're only 16, so Christ's sake, you don't have to pay any damn bills or get taxed or anything yet. But eventually you will. Eventually our money will go. Your money's going to go to something. And that's kind of, it's amazing for us to sit here and talk about this, because everything that happened all those years ago are now coming back, to affect us. And I think it's interesting, and what I wanted to focus the segment on was a discussion about the costs of war. And Hannah found this unique study. I guess we could call it a study, right? I mean,
yeah, Brown University put together just kind of a cost of war paper. I mean, it's a nice little paper, and they have the full downloadable PDF, and they also have just the executive summary, which is what we're going to draw most of our stuff from. But it's available. We have it in the links in the description, and it's just a really nice. This is probably the best that I've been able to find is for bringing together a nice, clean cost of war to everything that we've done since 9/11. Because once we, it's basically a good starting point. So you said that your son, he essentially was born after 9/11. Well, they haven't really gotten a good name yet, but there's a generation that's alive now in our country that has never known to not be in some form of conflict. There were some short periods in our lifetime where there was nothing. So between Desert Storm and some of the later I guess conflicts and things that we had through Clinton in the Balkans, we didn't really have any actual conflicts, any major military forces that were going through. So the 9/11 thing was a big turning point in our lives. But since then, it has really turned into a perpetual war. It's something that the Russians tried to do when they went into that general area. And this is a new world. So it's not so much that it's coming back to roost. It's been here the whole time, and now we're finally starting to see. And this paper does a good job bringing it together because I've seen some price tags in the $14 trillion range. Jack Ma from Alibaba has basically accused the U.S. of wasting $14 trillion on war. And this paper from Brown University comes to a closer to $5.6 trillion is the price tag since 9/11. I think that's probably a little bit more realistic if you concentrate just on the war, the defense department. And I mean, we could talk the full economic downturns and some of the stuff that's happened from that, and you can bring that in and obviously grow that number. But I think this is a good place to start.
Hey, but low interest rates, come on.
that could be true. So some of it, when you look at it, who finances the war? Obviously, our taxes do. I mean, there is private interests, different things like that, that do affect it. But one of the interesting parts of this piece was actually looking at the financial strategies. And, we could talk all day long about the other effects of war, right? I mean, for Christ's sake, Obama was sending out drones and killing people. And, drone strikes are off the charts. Is that part of war? Is that not part of war? How do you allocate some of these? I mean, are we at war with ISIS? Are we not at war with ISIS? I mean, technically speaking, have we ever not been at war since 9/11? And those are all really good questions. But the bigger thing is where does the finances come from, right? Where does the money come from? And does our cost of, expense actually bring any sort of a return? And so the graph that they had kind of shows the difference between, borrowing money and how many allies gave us grants versus whether we were the taxation funded the complete war. And I think that's a good place to look at it to begin with. Most of the wars since 1812 were financed through domestic borrowing. There is 2 exceptions to that rule. Well, 3, but the third one we'll get into at the end, right? The 2 major exceptions are the Korean War, which looks like it was almost 100% tax financed. The second one is that Gulf War, which was almost 80% Allied finance through different grants and things like that. Things we don't have to pay back. So the Gulf War didn't cost us in borrowing. And I think
the Gulf War was also like 14 hours long.
Yeah, all right.
It's something along those lines. So, literally, it was a tiny little space, and it was just a slap on the wrist. We didn't even take the dictator out of power at that point. It was, and then another thing is using the term war. We haven't been declared in a state of war since World War II. All of these have been conflicts, and so that changes where the money can come from and whether or not who can make these declarations and who can instigate these conflicts. Because obviously, if we don't have Congress is required to declare a state of war, but as we've seen with a lot of this tariff stuff, is the executive branch has the ability to do a lot of things under the guise of national security.
Exactly. And the unique thing here, right, is post 9/11, over 30% was done through foreign borrowing. So what does that do, right, Hannah? I mean, what's the big difference? I mean, we domestically borrow, and then all of a sudden now we're borrowing from overseas. So what's the big impact for us?
Well, I would just say the increasing growing of the deficit and the people who own our bonds. So if you talk about if China called in all of the U.S. bonds, we don't have enough money allocated to possibly pay it. And so instead of domestically funding these wars and domestically funding these conflicts, we've essentially outsourced our financing. So what that does is that gives other places, other companies, other countries the economic power over the U.S. war machine. And we have to keep an eye on what's happening because we have all of these things that have been happening lately with the economy and how a lot of the administration at the moment is trying to restrict and isolate the U.S. economy because we are so dependent on the rest of the world. Well, when you start doing foreign loans to finance your war machine, that is technically a national security threat because of the fiscal danger of them calling in their loans, and if you do things like the World Trade Organization, you can file a grievance against countries, and everybody can put sanctions on you if you're not paying your loans back. We have created this global system, and it spreads the power and the wealth around the world. And I don't have a bigger problem with that. I just don't like what we're using it for. So by using all of this financing for warfare and things like that, which we've given the Chinese, we've given Israelites, we've given a lot of the European countries and the Germans who create a lot of our chips and stuff, we've given them a lot of money and a lot of power and grown them. I mean, Brussels is insanely powerful. And when you look at what the European Union has been doing, they've been losing some stuff. And the Chinese have been growing exponentially because they've essentially created a perfect corporate state. Under the guise of a communist state. So like what we've been doing is kind of distributing our massive wealth out to the world. And this isn't entirely a bad thing, but we're now fighting against it. And so we talk about trying to build U.S. financing and make things more fiscally conservative. And we spend all of this money on these wars. One of the things that's in the Brown paper says that every American taxpayer spent something like $23,000 roughly on the war since 2001. Now, if you think about the individual paycheck and how much money each person has made on average, I think the average income is around $50,000 a year right now. I mean, that's since 2001 is 2018 right now. That's 17 years. That's over $1,000 a year, like maybe $1,100 a year. Can you imagine if you had an $1,100 tax a year just levied on you because war? Like that's a big deal. That's a lot of money. And so obviously it's probably higher than that because there's a very large financial section of this country that doesn't pay their fair share on that. So these are all things that I talk about when it comes to the cost of this war and what we've been doing. And I wanted to kind of go over where we are now. So like this horrible thing happened in 2011 and the United States became aware of, I guess, religious extremism and a lot of the warfare and terrorism that's happening. This is where we are. It's I don't really see it being too much better. One of the things I looked at was the so-called war on terror. I mean, just some of the things that are happening right now is Afghanistan, Iraq is still. I mean, that was a power vacuum and created ISIS. We had false information on that one. Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, the whole Israel-Saudi Arabia alliance that's really bombing the hell out of a lot of really, really poor people, creating some of the worst humanitarian crises in the world in Yemen right now. There's an operation happening in Kashmir in India that we've been kind of sort of supporting back and forth between India and the Pakistanis. So like there's a lot of stuff that's happening that doesn't seem like it's getting a lot better. It seems more like the video game Metal Gear and a perpetual war economy. So that's the state of things. And I guess, Zach, what do you think about some of this stuff? Like, where do you think we are? Are we going, is it better? Is it the exact same? Is it worse?
Well, I wonder, I was talking about that, my story of being in the hospital, and I had kind of a before and an after, and we as Americans have a before and after. Did we have this level of kind of fake hero worship of the military? Like we worship them kind of in theory. It's kind of like these wars, like we want to have them, but we don't really want to pay them. And the politicians definitely don't want us to see where this money's going. It's really weird that like anytime the military budget doesn't go up, like people freak out. I mean, where's their military budget? Was like $750 billion a year. It's something just insane amount of money. And what's weird is it isn't. I mean, it's affecting maybe people in terms of taxes, but what percentage of people are actually in the military now? They're actually like kind of sectioned off. And we love paying for contractors to make tons of money, Blackwater and all that. But then when veterans come back and have issues, we're like, oh, we don't need money for you. Which is like, we're not really taking care of people. Man, if someone takes a knee at a football game, whoa, hell to pay. But then when someone has PTSD and then can't see somebody for a year and then commit suicide, it's not even it's not even noticed. Like the human cost is really there. And it's crazy that, W decided to invade Iraq. And I think at the time I was even like, yeah, let's do it. Like I was falling for the Kool-Aid. And it's decimated a part of the world for probably the next 50 years at least. And
well, I mean,
people
Saddam
are going to just cash in from it.
The entire Saddam situation was something that needed to change. I mean, Saddam was a terrible person who did horrible things. Christopher Hitchens also came around when he supported the war, and that's an issue that Chris and I both have had problems with his philosophy. But as time went on, he became a little bit less hawkish on that, and a lot of people, John McCain and that's when he said one of the biggest mistakes that he ever made, besides some of this weird pay-to-play payday tax loan stuff he did when he first started off and everything. But they basically said that what we kind of did with Iraq was, this invasion thing. We created a power vacuum that created this new growing militant force like ISIS. What we should have done, and what I had been saying for all of the different Syria and the Yemen conflicts as well, is that we should be supporting like the Noam Chomsky model. Who is being oppressed in these situations? What group of people is being attacked, murdered, killed, isolated, oppressed? Find those people and help them. Give them food, give them money, do all the outreach that we do with the rest of the world and help those people. And we democratically overthrow these countries or overthrow their leaderships. Like, that's the only way you don't create these massive problems that we have and create perpetual wars. Because as soon as you knock off the head, it's just like the Hydra, right? 2 more pop up, 3 more pop up, and that's the whole perspective that I really think is what we've done. Is we've gone Greco-Roman, we've gone Greek mythology here, and we're trying to attack the big bad monster that doesn't exist.
Well, if you know our history, we're not really good at that whole regime change. I mean,
I know.
I mean, look at Central America. It's like anytime a country was like, the people were taking over, we're like, no, our companies are going to lose money. Let's like the military in charge and kill everybody. That's another country. We don't care. And that's the thing, there clearly wasn't a plan with Iraq. Like they were like, oh, they're going to rise up and love us. And it's like, not really, especially where you fire all the military people and then they're like, what do I do? Oh, I'll just take over, ISIS or whoever can actually pay me and take care of my family. And you set up a system. It's like, I think that's why Libya got kind of screwed up, because Obama was like, well, I can't invade, but I still have to kind of help. And it was like, there was no, in these situations, there really isn't a good answer. You kill the dictator and there's nothing in place to take over. And our military is not equipped for that. All we can do is go to Afghanistan. Oh, Taliban takes over. Okay, just kill a bunch of people. Strangely, getting into a land war in Asia, as they say, not a great idea. And we haven't helped in these situations, and the military isn't really built for that. And it is one of the situations where I don't know where the good answer is. Clearly what we've done is not the right answer. And we can be like, okay, we're kind of responsible for that as Americans, for what's happening, what's going on in the world. Some people don't like to take any responsibility for what's happened. Like, well, I didn't make that decision, but I don't know. I mean, our standing obviously is not so good at the moment, but
well,
it's just,
it almost feels like we'll be at war again in a different avenue. I mean, I guess technically we're still at war, I think. I don't know. Technically.
I mean, Afghanistan counts, and I know like Iraq, Obama, we made a big deal about getting troops out, but they come back in. They always seem to be necessary. I don't know if the ultimate Syria, just leave and see what happens. Well, bad things.
Yeah. Well, Syria and Lebanon and Yemen are all not going to be going away for a long time. Like these are holes, humanitarian holes, and the current U.S. foreign policy is basically to screw all of those people. So one of the things that I always talk about for kind of where we are and what we've got now for the entirety of what we've created and what has happened since 9/11 is this refugee crisis that we're kind of having throughout the entire world, not the one coming out of the South Americas. That's a completely different story from all of the authoritarian regimes that were pretending to be socialist regimes. But the Middle Eastern and the Southern Asian crises that we're seeing are all Western countries trying to bring in the Western idea of democracy to cultures that are very, very different, and essentially trying to take them from the Stone Age to the Internet age, and skip a lot of really important things that really do need to happen. They talked about some of the problems in China, how they went from basically agriculture to cell phones and the internet. They skipped the entirety of the Industrial Revolution, and the side effect of that was basically smog. People were unable to breathe the air. They just didn't have the time to build up the idea of economic protection and not economic, but ecological protection. The same kinds of things are happening with the Western countries go in and they try to put the Western, the Jeffersonian, the Madisonian, or the Hamiltonian ideals into a government that already exists and has cultures that don't quite blend with that, and it fails. And then all of when everything breaks down and people start fighting and bickering and turns into a tribal war, the people that aren't interested in this leave. And all the people are shutting their borders up. And it's like there's no people taking responsibility for all of these wars. Europe is taking way more of it because they're closer just by proximity. But like the United States is essentially shut down. We're like, nope, we're not taking any of those people. Although I would say the United States probably should take the most because we probably have the most fingerprints all over all of these different conflicts. And this is something that we're talking about world wars happening in the near future. I think there's going to be a world war or the next major war that happens, and it's not going to be a war of two big guys fighting over each other. It's going to be like a civil war that mutates into something much bigger from all of these different geopolitical recessions we're seeing, where all these people are kind of creating laws to keep immigrants out, to keep different people out, to keep different cultures out. And it's getting nasty. I don't know if it's going to get any better. I don't see it getting any better because we keep seeing countries electing these right-wing populist leaders, and I'm genuinely worried. I'm hopeful that the United States is far away from a lot of this, that we won't get too much fighting on our lands, but I don't know what it's going to be like fiscally in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's definitely a big push in the quote unquote skeptic community. People are kind of anti-immigrant, very kind of right wing, and if we're going to war and if we're decimating these countries, you have to do something with the people. Otherwise, you're just saying, let them die, I guess.
Yeah.
And the us versus them aspect that's been definitely growing makes it, I guess, easier to just say, well, those are just those people who live in that part of the world. So, they don't count. They're not humans, and we're losing that. And I don't like that at all.
Yeah, the Amazing Atheist is not a humanist. Well, I think that's pretty much it on that one. I don't know. I think we pretty much exhausted 9/11 here. I mean, it's the same thing every year. We talk a little bit more, unless you had anything more you wanted to add to it, Chris.
Is the Amazing Atheist even still a thing?
Oh, dude, did you not hear about it?
No.
He's doing porn or something now.
Huh.
Yeah, and there was a video.
No.
You don't want to know then?
No, I do because I don't believe this. I don't believe this.
Okay, well, there's a video that went kind of sort of viral on a couple of weird Reddit threads that I'm on, and it was the Amazing Atheist pouring like hot oil on his junk, just burning the crap out of himself out there like a dare, and just totally on video, like not like just like audio. So yeah. It's out there if you really want to find it. I guarantee anyone out there wants to try to find something like that. I couldn't click on it. That link is staying blue. I will not click on that goddamn link. But
there's moments where we're at almost the same point in terms of like episodes, and you go, man, how come after all this time the show's not bigger and I'm not like a known name? And it's like, because you'd probably go insane if you had a certain level of popularity and do stuff like that.
No,
I was just seeing a lot of people, even like atheist famous, which isn't regular famous, like just losing their minds. I know a lot of people losing their minds because of who we elected president, but it just seems like some people just can't handle any kind of fame, because when you get that, like the positive is great, but then the negative is way worse.
I think it's the scrutiny.
Everything you tweet or everything you say gets not necessarily twisted, sometimes accurately reported, and then you have to deal with it.
It's like the scrutiny the scrutiny that's come through, like people like Michael Shermer, Lawrence Krauss. I mean, you're like, really? But like, they can't give them a long enough time. Like the scrutiny will find what, if you're doing something sketchy, like people will find out. It's unbelievable. But it's just
doing bad things, the white men behaving badly.
Yeah.
There's so many like people just I don't know. I'm not the arbiter of truth. Like, you do podcasts, you're talking about shit all the time, and then, you know, I did curse, but and then you're like, well, when it comes to these people who've been accused by multiple women, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, David Silverman recently. I mean, he was on every podcast I knew except like mine before American Atheist, and he was one of the top people. And clearly, being a leader was a bit more than he could handle, and you know, now he's trying to like crawl back in. And I'm like, just, we have a lot of people who have voices and are saying important things. I think we can wait a while before giving somebody not a second chance, probably like an eighth chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I'm still amazed that he has that, I guess. I don't know. I'm not going to Google it. I'm going to move on with my life.
Do that. We will not include that link. We will not include that link.
Going to some kind of 12-step program, you're like, and then I visited Reddit. I feel like that was the first part of the story. No.
Well, I think I've got like my 8-year badge there. So I've been in Reddit from the first couple years were really nice, man. Like, Reddit was awesome. It was like the place where memes started and the rage comics. I mean, it was goofy. It was fun. And then it went political, and it changed so much. And so, I don't know. I mean, it's just the same with everything else. Like, Facebook went political too. People started posting news stories as opposed to their, you know, statuses and things like that. So, like, that changed the whole dynamic. Once something gets big enough, it changes a little bit. So,
well, speaking of not being a humanist, we have a segment tonight where Hannah read a book. He's going to read the book to us.
Oh, God, no.
You're not going to read to us? I thought you were going to read to us. What the hell, Hannah? That was the whole point. You're going to read the book to us because you said it was like a love letter to atheists and agnostics.
Oh, okay. Real quick, Zach, any Dan Brown books? Any Dan Brown novels ever in your history?
I think I listened to one of them, like, book on CD, and it was just so over the top. And I remember the main character, the one that Tom Hanks plays in the movies, at the end, like jumping out of a plane with like a blanket or something. He uses a parachute and he survives. So,
Robert Langdon. Yeah, I don't remember anything that extreme, but
that was enough for me to go, yeah, okay, I don't need to check this out. But hey,
what about
everybody
you,
has different tastes, I hear.
Tanner, you done any of the Dan Brown stuff?
I know that he has.
You've seen the movies, probably.
Yeah, I've seen the movie, but I didn't like it, and I thought it was dumb. So,
which one, Angels and Demons or Da Vinci Code?
No, Angels and Demons.
Angels and Demons with the whole Illuminati conspiracy stuff. I've gone through the one that I didn't like, Lost Symbol. That was this weird Masons conspiracy thing. I couldn't do it, but I've listened to the audiobooks of all of his books, and mostly because what he does is kind of like an art history adventure tale. So like my wife is really, she got an art degree, 2 of them actually. Her master's degree took her into photography, but her basic in fine arts, she had to go through all these art history classes and all this stuff. And so I'm interested in it. And when we go to museums and do that kind of stuff, I don't know what the heck I'm looking at. I'm a dirty engineer, numbers, and I don't do this feeling thing where everybody's like, I feel the emotions in this painting. I don't do that. I don't understand it. And so like I use Dan Brown as kind of this like crash course in a lot of this Italian history, and the Inferno was a really good. I genuinely enjoyed that, about Dante's Inferno and the Divine Comedy. That was pretty cool. But the book that I'm talking about this time is Origin. It's his most recent book, and it really is a love letter to atheists and agnostics. And so he hits all of the basic points of like the debates between believers and non-believers, and he does a really good job. Like, he doesn't go deep. Everything that you'll hear in this book, as someone who's been in the non-believer community, you'll know everything that he's talking about. There's nothing. He mentions Hitchens and Dennett and Dawkins, and he gets a little bit into Stephen Jay Gould when he talks about evolution, and it ties in with a lot of Spanish history and Spanish art. And it was a really interesting thing because I did not expect it. The reason I listened to it was because on Fresh Air, on NPR, they had an interview, and they were talking to him about his belief systems, and he basically came off saying that he's an agnostic for like the Spinozan agnostic, or the Einsteinian agnostic, where it's like there's some kind of beauty in the universe, and that could be some kind of forming intelligence or whatever. If you're cool with that or not, but I listened to it and I was genuinely happy about it, but like. It's still that really light touch and brings in that funky storyline. So like, that was a question, is if you guys aren't really big fans of that kind of stuff, but like, would you listen to something that it kind of tickles your fancy a little bit, and it does it in a pretty entertaining way? Because that's one of the things that I run into with atheist books, is that I don't really know of any that are stories. There's not a lot of. We've talked to a couple of artists that were non-believer and writers about their belief systems, but like M. Dolan Hickman, his was about the child abuse thing, and like kind of knocking on what was that, 1324 was the book, Tanner? I think that was his book.
Yes, 1234.
1234. And then we talked to James White. That was the guy who wrote like horror stories and stuff. And he was awesome. And like, but he didn't specifically, it wasn't like an atheist horror story. And Hickman's book wasn't like an atheist, it was like, kind of knocking religion or whatever. But like, have you guys any good fiction, any good storytelling with like a non-believer tone to it? Because I kind of liked it. I kind of liked like having a little bit of that world in a mainstream way that maybe other people who weren't thinking about it.
For me, it's Neuromancer. That's
so
probably
William Gibson.
One of the best one. Yeah, William Gibson. I even have I haven't gotten to his third one. I've only got about halfway through the second one, but the first one, Neuromancer, was amazing.
I don't remember there being that many overtones on non-belief on that one. I mean, I remember he talked a little bit about religion, but was it kind of, just refresh my memory, what were some of the things that he talked about?
Well, they talk about basically the fact that they're their own gods, that between them and the computers, they have created their own god, therefore no god could have really existed.
Ah. So you got, Zach, anything? You got any good books or anything you like to read?
Well, I mean, the only thing I can think off the top of my head was like American Gods, but that's actually like, stuff like Game of Thrones. They have these different gods, but they actually like show themselves actually do things. So you're like, okay, I would believe that when they, you do that and bring somebody back from the dead. So that sort of thing. Yeah, and I think in fiction, I've interviewed a couple authors who've done kind of self-published stuff. One was about an atheist who God like meets him and they have to work together to save the world. But it's we need to get into the fiction there, huh?
Well, I guess it's just kind of enjoyable. One of the things that I liked about what Dan had done is that he really did his homework. So one of the things that bugs me the most is when you see the philosophical arguments put together. A lot of the things we talk about, the infinite regress, or we talk about some of the things that are, it seems like the morality arguments. We hear about them, and you hear people basically putting out the bad arguments, and you hear it ad nauseum. And Dan did his homework. He really did some good work, is finding like what are the nuances. So to like an entry level argument, an entry level conversation to the whole story. And one of the things that I didn't like about the book was that it gets a bit preachy. Dan has a tendency to do that. It's just long-winded segments of people talking in dialogue that there's no way this would ever happen in the real world. One of the ways he tries to pass it off is that Robert Langdon is an autodidact who remembers everything he's ever read. And a lot of the people that are involved in these things are usually considered either academics and professors and what would they be, directors of museums, so some of the smarter people in the world when it comes to philosophy and art. And so like he does a good job of kind of like putting the whole philosophy out there, but it can get dry. Like the end of the book, it's kind of slamming you over the head with some of the things about like why Dan is an agnostic and why the main character, or the main I guess he would be a main antagonist, but he's kind of a protagonist at the same time, because it's an artificial intelligence thing. It's a big play on it. But the main guy in the storyline that's not Robert Langdon is an adamant, devout Atheist, and it makes a discovery essentially about where humans came from, what started life, and what human life will be. And he doesn't. It's a really interesting idea. I've never really heard of it given that way. So for anybody who not as a non-spoiler, it's basically he uses supercomputers and quantum mechanics to determine some really interesting thoughts about what we could possibly learn on that. And so like that's the whole reason why I thought this would be a cool story to check out. So if anybody who takes a look at it, I think it's like I want to say like a 22-hour audiobook. And I use a thing. My local library has a cloud library, it's called, but I've used Overdrive as well, depending on what your local library uses. And you can usually download these things and put it on hold. And once it's available, you can download it. You can listen to these books for free. Your tax dollars are paying for them. So anybody listening, I recommend that you at least check that stuff out and get in there and start just consuming books as fast as you can. But do you guys use the audiobooks from your local library?
Yeah, I just downloaded Lonesome Dove, and I swear it has to be multiple books because it's like 36 hours. I'm like, you only get 21 days to listen. I'm like, how many hours a day can I listen? We listened to the audio version of American Gods, and that was like 16 hours, and that was a long-winded book. That dude could have cut that thing a lot.
The longest audiobook I've ever done to is Cryptonomicon, and God, I can't remember the name of the writer right now, but it was 70 hours long. I actually didn't finish it the first 21 days. I did not finish it. I had to go back and rehold it and finish it like the last few hours of the book. It's 70 hours. That book must weigh like 40 pounds. It's got to be huge in real life.
It's like, yeah, you have to go on a long like road trip every day. How many hours are you awake, a day to listen to something?
Well, the Game of Thrones books I was listening to are 30 to 40 hours, and I listened to those. And typically, what I would do is I would listen to them in the car on the way to work, and I had a half hour to 40-minute drive. And 2 days a week I had to take my son to school, so that I had an extra half hour each day. And then I have the drive home, which is roughly a half hour, 40 minutes as well. So I was getting an hour to an hour and a half just in there. Then you got to cook dinner, right? And if you think about it, while you're cooking dinner, you can do it. You can also do it while you're working out. Not saying that I work out, but the thought was there when I
So do you put earbuds in or something? You put earbuds in or something when you're doing it, or you just listen to it like a stereo?
It depends. For the most part, I put earbuds in though. I have a cheap wireless headset that I got for work.
But you just got it though.
Yeah. Well, I've had this similar ones, but yes, I just got this one recently. I got a new version because the old one broke. I just buy cheap ones. I don't buy the expensive ones. And
Zach, are you a car guy only or what?
No, I listen with earbuds. I mean, my issue is, I'm interviewing people every week, and I'm usually like binge listening to shows, so I only have so much time to listen, but I'm like, oh man, I have 15 days left. I still have like 30 hours of this book. I got to keep, I got to really crank it out. But it's something you kind of forget that you have. Like it used to be the library. You just go there and get a physical book. Well, you can get ebooks now. You can get audiobooks now. And it's a really good thing. Although I think I put my name in for like Game of Thrones, and I'm sure those books will be available like 4 years after the show's over.
Yeah.
Because there are some like really long waiting lists for really popular stuff.
Yeah, and the other thing with Audible that you can do too is you can actually share books with people now. So like and so like in my family we share an Audible account, and so my son wanted his own and wanted me to buy books I'd never read. Like he's like, "Hey, let's read The Martian." No, thank you. Not going to read that.
Oh, come on. You got to tell me what's wrong with the science. You got to tell me what's wrong with the science, man.
No interest, man. I have no interest.
None?
No.
Really?
I don't find the story appealing in any way, shape, or form.
So you already saw the movie though?
No, I didn't watch the movie either. I bought it for him. I let him watch it. I'm not going to watch this stupid thing. I don't find any of this. I don't find it like The Martian reminds me of remember what's the Tom Hanks movie where he gets stranded?
Castaway.
Yeah. That's what that movie reminded me of. And I have no interest in that. Like, Castaway had like two good scenes right at the beginning and right at the end. Everything in between, you're like, oh my God, like this is just a 2-hour nightmare. And that's how I see The Martian.
Well, The Martian itself was basically like a how-to science book. So like the book is very different than the movie. So the book, essentially what the author did was he talked to a bunch of people who work at NASA and a bunch of people who were like bioethicists and essentially talked about how you would create plants on Mars and how you could possibly do it. And since then, he has actually created one of like the most realistic, I guess, bio spaces in like a desert, like a synthetic Mars around. Anyways, the whole thing was like it's a how-to, so it's like a really dry user manual kind of for the book. So like it's a different experience than the movie. The movie, obviously, it's Matt Damon. The guy Matt Damon. So like it's Hollywood. it's much more Hollywood. But like the book, you might like because it's kind of like reading a science book.
But I don't like reading science books. I read science papers, because I can do that broken up over time. But well,
to be honest with you, it'd be way easier to read this book than it is to read an actual science paper.
But it's half the time. Like a science paper is a lot less.
Well, there's
time.
a story there too, though. I mean, I don't know.
Maybe.
I think you would enjoy it. I think you're just a little bit of a prejudice there. I don't know.
My screenplay idea about an atheist stranded on Mars probably shouldn't try to sell it to you.
No, you should. You can.
Atheist
I won't buy
fiction,
it,
but not that kind of atheist.
I'll help you produce it. But I'm not going to buy it. I wouldn't buy it.
Right.
I'll help make money off it. I'm open to making
Martian,
money on anything.
Seen the movie, wife rolls her eyes when it's on TV. I'm like, let's watch it again. No.
For me, like I like the fantasy side of things, right? I like a lot of fantasy. That's a big thing, in my life, obviously. And so I really like the fantasy side, because I like witches, dragons. I really like dragons, magic, and so that's appealing to me. And I also like the weird AI stuff, that futuristic thing.
Well, that's another thing you would like about Origin, then, is because the third character in that story is an artificial intelligence. And
in fairness, if you had told me about this more than a day ago, I would be happy to actually read this book. I could read. Like, this is something I would be interested in.
So a quick gist of the entire story is that there is a guy who's a super genius computer science guy, and he has been essentially correct in most of his predictions about all the things that are going to happen in tech. And he's a billionaire, and he's super elite, and he has this, it's kind of like the Deus Machina or Ex Machina movie, where the guy was like a super Google genius and he created artificial intelligence in that movie. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was a really good movie. But anyways, the whole story for the Origin is essentially this guy is a super artificial intelligence and super tech guy. He's been a 100% accurate prediction rate for major developments in tech. And the story starts, a major development. He's announcing something super duper. And then just like every other Dan Brown book, something crazy happens, a crazy storyline bouncing back and forth between famous places and explanations and symbology. Not as much symbology and like story or like puzzles as I would have expected, but like there's an artificial intelligence in it that is really, really well done. And at the very end, you get this really nice artificial intelligence sandwich that you get some tears in it. You're like, holy crap, that's stunning. And then there's a twist to it that just like it hits you in the face so hard that you're like, one of the things I hate is like M. Night Shyamalan twist where you're just like, here's left field, now we're gonna go to right field, and it's just like, okay, that's fine. That's a twist. That's crazy. But like, it needs to be realistic. And it's a very, very well done artificial intelligence twist that made me feel like happy and sick at the same time. Is awesome. So like, there's a really nice payoff for people who are big AI guys. And for people like some of the people we've interviewed on the show before, there's my friend from Turkey who, oh man, I've lost his name too. We haven't talked to him in over 2 years now. I talked to him about it, and he said that show was garbage, and I hate everything he's ever done. So, so I mean, it's a very story driven, and I guess it might not be as realistic as far as real computer science is. But I don't know. I enjoyed that aspect of it, and that may be an area where you would like it too, the AI.
Yeah. Well, speaking of AI, and I don't know how to tie this. I'm not going to try and tie this.
Don't even tie. Just no segue. Just dry prison.
Just
sex.
Hey,
dry prison sex.
Come on. No. So the last segment, I wanted to talk about, and this is going to be kind of fun because Zach is not in Michigan, but he can give an outsider's perspective from his state. So we talk a lot about politics and we talk a lot about voting, and we committed this year to aggressively talk about local politics. And so tonight I wanted to talk about ballot proposals, and we don't have to get into super extreme depth, right? Or depth. I don't know how to say it. Depth. There you go. I want to get into depth of, that's a dumb word. Depth. I can't even say it. That word is a dumb word. But I wanted to go into detail about some of the proposals this year, because I think it's extremely important that we all get out and vote. And I guess I'll open the conversation up because, Hannah, you had one of the most popular threads that showed up in my Facebook feed 100 times over. You had over 150 comments on this thread.
I know. Right? It went bonkers, and I just said, you know what? I'm wiping my hands and getting the hell out of here.
And so one of so your argument or your discussion point is, hey, if you chose not to vote, which is kind of funny because you're a Bernie bro to some aspect, right? But you basically kind of said, hey, you still should have gone out and voted no matter what, right? And you had hundreds of these people come out and basically argue against it. You had libertarians. Remember that guy that I debated gun control with? He came out against you, and he doesn't even vote liberal. He's a libertarian. He's off the charts libertarian. And
all right, so
go ahead.
I'll just give a quick gist. So the biggest argument that I saw it multiple times, was if you're saying that people that didn't vote are responsible for the outcomes of the election, that's kind of like saying that pedestrians are responsible for car accidents all over this country. And it's like, I love the fact that you're going all over the fallacies on that for fallacy of false equivocal. But in the end, what we're talking about here is that over, I think it was 43 or 47%, 43% of the people in this country did not vote in the last election. And I said that if you don't vote once in a decade, your citizenship should be up for review. And much like paying taxes, voting is one of the most important things that you should have to do to be a citizen and to maintain your citizenship status. And my whole point of that is that anybody who says, I was born here, I deserve all the things that I come here, and I'm not going to participate in anything, and I'm going to try to pay as little taxes as I can, and just basically just take everything and not give anything back in. Those people bug me. It's just a pet peeve of mine. And but also the one other thing is that I'm trying to think of a way. So I think people respond more to negative consequences than they do to positive consequences. So someone posted an idea of saying, you get $100 credit to your taxes when you vote, and you can do $100 write-off, and you'll get $100 more back at the end of the year, or something along those lines. Like having a positive consequence, or a positive positive feedback or something. I can never remember what it is, but it's just like when you have a positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Have a positive reinforcement for voting, so that people associate voting with a positive thing, like getting $100 back, or creating a mandatory system like what Australia has, where people just get drunk and obliterated and they go vote, and they have problems with that. Or I was thinking something along the lines of, your citizenship gets questioned. The reason I thought of that is because a lot of people that talk about those types of things, like they're, red-blooded Midwesterns who love to say they are all about this country, and then they never make it to the polls. Or people who one other part of this is that the voting day should be a national holiday, so that there is no economic suppression of the vote. So nobody can work. No private companies or anything, so that everyone can get out on voting day or something along those lines. So this isn't a one-size-fits-all fixing everything that comes with voting, but what it is trying to motivate the huge block of people that don't vote. And the reason being is because the majority of the people that don't vote are young and minorities. And those people skew insanely hard, some 60% towards the progressive stance. A lot of them don't vote because they're too scared to go to a public place and vote. And the other ones just don't. They're 21, 22. They have no interest in voting because they've kind of sort of had a nice life. And once I hit 25, 30 years old, I started to appreciate voting and taxes because I was paying so much of them. Like, it takes a few minutes for those people to get in. Because one thing we do know is that people that are 40, 50, 60, 70, they vote every single time. And so getting that minority, getting that smaller group of people that don't vote could seriously change the election outcomes. And that's what I was basically trying to say. And it went bonk.
Yeah. And that's that's crazy. I do
like the idea of, I don't know about mandatory, but definitely making it something that people do. And of course, people were saying, well, if you make the day like Tuesday, why is it Tuesday? I have no idea. Make it Saturday, but there'll be people in service industries who can't vote. Well, make it easier for people to vote. Do the opposite of what the Republicans are doing. And especially in our state, there's one county, there was a big story that like 7 of 9 voting places, they were just going to shut down. And they were saying, well, it doesn't comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm like, this is like a firehouse in a school, and like, you have bigger problems if you aren't, don't have accessibility just on that one day. But yeah, definitely finding ways to open it up. Like, I think the strategy of like Democrats trying to appeal to Republicans, like, no, the people who didn't vote, there's a lot of them, especially in local elections. I'm glad you're talking about local elections because it's so critical and so like ignored. I think that's why it's flipped. Like, Republicans have super majorities in so many states.
Republicans vote in all those local
Georgia,
elections.
it's crazy.
Like Republicans vote in their local elections. They vote in their city council elections because their average age is older. Like, they're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. Like, they vote all the time. Like, it's insane how much higher their voter. That's one of the things out of the off year midterm is so much higher because it's not a national election. There's not a whole bunch of hoopla, and it's not national television that there's a president going to election. It's, your local elections. It's your senators. It's your representatives in the House. It's your local city councils, your governors, your mayors. Young kids aren't caring about that. What is it on MTV? Is there a get out to vote thing for MTV? No, or whatever it is, Spotify, if anything like that's going on, like that isn't, that's what young kids respond to. And so like those types of things need to be ingrained. And I mean, the Republicans take advantage of it completely. That's why we have what we have now.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the ballots or items on the ballot this year is gerrymandering, right?
Yep.
That's
voters, not politicians. We've talked about it already.
Yep, and we did. We talked a little bit about it before, and I think it's important to remind everybody about that because they're looking to create an independent citizen redistribution or redistricting commission, and it's extremely important that that gets passed because that's what's happening. And it's funny because our buddy Cass, he's like, yeah, where I live, I'm literally in this tip that's surrounded by a whole different other district. He's like, it literally comes in and it looks like Florida, except for smaller. Mm-hmm. It's like Trump's Florida, like it's really small and thin, and it kind of comes in there. Or the Amazing Atheist, I bet, because I think he has a micro penis too. But
that was the whole point of the video, bro. You've already watched it. Did you watch it on the?
No, I googled American or Amazing Atheist, and literally it comes up like all the searches says micro penis. Atheist has micro penises. Like,
yeah, that's like what the video. That's what it led with, and I was like, I'm not clicking on it. It's like it was like Burns.
Get rid of that.
It's like Burns micro penis or something. I was like, oh man.
Yep. But anyway, so the voters politicians group is aggressively going after redistricting because that's coming up. And so this is a huge thing because if we get this now, we don't have to wait another 10 years. It's something that's going to be on the ballot. We can put it in place, and people can't just redistribute based on how they want to skew the vote for the next 10 years.
I believe the Michigan Commission is going to be 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 4 independents, which, I mean, let's face it, it's going to be hard to find independents, but still, I like the idea of kind of trying to keep some kind of like 50-50, like trying to keep some kind of neutrality there, because one of the things you're going to generate on that is going to be, it's going to be forced by partisanship. So like the way it was created before was like whoever was in charge, whatever majority was in charge, it's illegal and it's against the Constitution, unconstitutional to create districts to discriminate based on race, religion, or sex. But it's completely allowed if you're going to just basically partition all that stuff for people who typically vote Republican versus Democrat. So it's allowed for you to create a partisan gerrymander, but it's not allowed for you to create, like I said, gender, sex, or religion. But the thing is that those things are usually very closely tied together, and so the whole idea of like separating them is pretty much fallacious. And this whole community they're going to create is like, let's say there's even the independents kind of 50-50 lean left and right. Then we have a 50-50 panel that has to kind of sort of agree. What that's going to do is at least lump more people from both parties into these groups, because in my opinion, every district should kind of be a battle. Like there's the whole idea of like, there's like no question Democrats are going to win this one, no question Republicans are going to win this one. But that's dangerous, because it shouldn't be like that. Like there should be a discussion of ideas and a flip-flop in there, because 30-year representatives from one location just doesn't seem, I guess, democratic.
Yeah, I don't know. So
yeah, I think the word is that for Democrats to turn over the House, they have to win by like 8 points.
23 seats or 26 seats.
Because of what the redistricting has happened. I mean, I think it was like North Carolina. They basically said, we don't have enough time to redraw them. They're clearly unconstitutional, but we don't have time. And I know in Pennsylvania, there's like a couple where the guy just won, and it was like a district that Trump won by 20%, Democrat won, but because they're redistricting it, it's like a totally different.
It was Connor Lamb. Connor Lamb won, and he's going to be in office for like 3 months, and it was a huge deal. But he was like this really centrist and pro-gun Democrat. And so everybody's saying, well, the Democrats' best option is to go this weird centrist version of like a super Hillary Obama hybrid. And a lot of people were like, no, we don't really like that whole idea, because the majority of the Democratic base, when we saw the most energy, came out of the progressive wing, where we saw the Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stuff. That's where we're seeing a lot of energy right now. And the older white Democrats are holding on to that as much as they can, and basically the ones that are tied to any kind of corporate powers. And so like the Pennsylvania stuff, that was the legislative could not get it to the point where they could agree with everything. And so the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania redistricted that. And the Supreme Court is a liberal Supreme Court in Pennsylvania. And so obviously the gerrymandering went more towards the Democrats. But I don't know if that was specific to the Connor Lamb thing, but that's still also getting voted on in November. So he was basically the representative for a very short period of time, and he has to win again now. And that race has not been making a bunch of noise. And so I'm guessing it's probably going to be a little bit lighter as far as the attention. He might not win this time around.
Yeah, exactly. Another one of the, and it's kind of funny, I'm hoping some of these Republicans don't win just based on some of these ballot options, right? And how these candidates are coming out and saying what they want to say. For example, the marijuana legalization ballot has shown
awesome to have that on a ballot.
Yep, have over 60%, people approving of it. Now, hopefully everybody comes out and votes.
Yeah.
But it's funny because the Libertarian candidate supports it, the Democratic candidate supports it, but the Republican candidate, Bill Shitty, basically says, well, hold on, I don't support this, tag. But if people vote for it, I'll approve it. So he's playing both roles there. And
he has to.
And the reason I'm excited for this more than anything else is only because of the fact that it will open the door to start taking people out of prison. That's the first thing that it's going to do. The decriminalize initiative that happened, I don't know, what was that, 10 years ago? God, I'm old. Anyway, so the decriminalize initiative, kept, lots of people out of prison, reduced the state, police or the city's police budget, by over $2 million a year by not having to police this. Right? That's in Grand Rapids, yes. And this here not only will raise taxes, but it will also, on top of that, work towards helping create a base to say, hey, nonviolent offenders, how do we get you out of prison, right? How do we start getting your rights back? And this opens a huge door because they're fighting all those battles in other states that have legalized. And now here we're going to be at the point where we can have these conversations too. And we can stop arresting people and putting people in prison for, ridiculous crimes. And we can actually move towards, focusing on real crime. We should be worried more about rape. We should be worried about, people poisoning the citizens of Flint, for Christ's sake, than we are about arresting the black kid walking on the street with, a couple of grams in his pocket. That's what we should be focusing on.
He's wearing a hoodie.
Exactly. And so, this initiative actually proposes a tax percentage which is higher than our state tax. It's a 10% basically sin tax. And normally I'm against sin tax, honestly. But in this case, I'll accept the sin tax if it helps, move the state forward in a more positive light.
I agree.
And if it, hey, let's not put people in jail, because all we're going to do is reduce the amount of money we spend, in jails.
Well, it's going to reduce the money that goes to private prisons because, private incarceration is a mega billion-dollar a year industry now, where a bunch of private dudes are making a pile of money. One of the things I really like about this is that we have the Voters Not Politicians Gerrymandering Act, which is getting a lot of energy from young people who are like, listen, this is bull. It's really easy. Trust big data, and let's make some numbers here, because that's essentially what the main tool they're going to be using for that is. They're going to be using big data. They're going to be using the information that the government naturally accrues on all of the citizens through a variety of measures, and then that's how they're going to distribute the information for how they should cut everything up to make it relatively equal. And then the other thing on that is going to be, if we start talking about marijuana legalization, that's going to bring a ton more young people out. It's one of the things that they were debating in legislative is whether or not they should just automatically in the Michigan State House and Senate just legalize it, just make it legal. The reason being is because if they legalize it and they can control what kind of happens, and because when all these propositions come through, the legislative can't completely control it, is if they get enough petition signatures and it's on the ballot, and young people are going to come out and they might pick the one the Republicans don't like, the one that doesn't quite tie everything up as much into big corporate interests or whatever. So we have all of those kinds of things that are bringing young people and minorities and people that probably wouldn't vote out to vote. And this midterm has a ton to offer for young people who don't like the idea that Republicans have every year in a lot of districts in Michigan, something like 40, 50, 60, 70% of the votes have gone Democratic, but almost 3 or 4 seats to 1 have gone to Republicans because of the way the district is gerrymandered. So let's say they get 60% of the votes, but Republicans still pick up seats, even though the 60% went to the Democratic votes. It's the same situation as we had 3 million people in the popular vote pick Hillary Clinton for the presidency, but due to the way that the Electoral College has been set up, that Donald Trump was able to win. And it's the largest disparity between the popular vote and the Electoral College that we've ever had. Like, these things make a difference. And young people are kind of, they don't like that idea that it's all this, back channel districting. So like, I'm super excited that maybe this will get young people out. I don't know, but I think young people are a little bit more politically aware than grandpa and grandma expect.
Yeah. And there's another proposal that I think will get young people coming out called it's basically represented by Michigan Time to Care. And it's ballot ID, like I think it's like 518-200 or some crap like that. But it's going to help provide workers with rights to earn sick time. So it's you're going to get sick time based on the size of your organization, how many hours you work, and you can continue to earn this. So that people working in the private sector will get paid sick time. And I'll pick on my company, for example, because my company offers certain things to salaried workers they don't offer to hourly workers. But I have somebody that works for me, and she's a single mother. If her daughter gets sick, she has to stay home. Like, it's not even a question. Like, there's, she has to do this. There's nobody else to take care of her kid other than her mom, and then her mom would have to call in sick or take a vacation day, right? So this proposal right here is actually extremely important because it's going to provide so many hours of work of paid sick time based on so many hours you work. So I believe the proposal says every 30 hours you earn an hour of sick time, and you can earn up to 9 days a year, right? That's huge for somebody in her position, And, we actually talked about this, ironically enough, last week. And I was like, you need to go out and vote. Make sure you're registered. Yeah. No, like, I don't think you understand. I get you guys don't care. Your generation doesn't seem to care about some of this stuff. But here's a reason to go out and vote. And oh, by the way, let me show you who backs this, right? And this is huge, because if you could start earning this sick time, think about it. Every 30 hours work. So you figure you can earn, after 8 weeks, roughly, no questions asked, you can earn a full day of sick time. That's huge when it comes to the middle of winter. That's huge when it comes to, having to take care of your children and having no government that provides socialized care for them.
It's one thing that brings things back to that initial segment of the cost of wars, the cost of healthcare, just continually going up and up and up. And we had Bernie Sanders and John McCain try to put through a bill to properly fund the healthcare of all of our veterans, and that got shut down by the Republican majority in the Senate. So, like, it makes you question what their real motives are. Coming from the South, Zach, do you have anything interesting that's going on as far as the ballots and things that you know of that are, maybe they're pushing through and trying to make some nice progressive changes where you're at?
Just we have a Democratic candidate for governor who might actually win, and first Black woman to run, as far as I know. But
or to get nominated at least.
I mean, I'm a contractor where I work, and it's been like 3+ years. I don't get vacation time, sick time. I wish we could rename some of these terms, like right to work, which basically means right to companies to do whatever they want. Like, you can fire someone, you don't have to give a reason. So that's not good. But yeah, it'd be nice to be able to earn some time off. Man, I need to move up to Michigan, other than the water. You guys are doing all right up there. You got nice beer.
Michigan has got a right to work thing that Governor Snyder just pushed through when he came in, he campaigned saying that he would not be a right to work guy. And then as soon as he came in, he okayed it. Essentially, the right to work thing, what it does is it allows people who work in union shops to not pay union dues, even though they're in a union shop. So, like, let's say I'm a machinist and an engineer, and I get a job at a big giant shop that is a UAW shop. So they work on diesel trucks and diesel and stuff. And I go in there and I say, no, I'm not going to pay my dues, but I still want all of the collective bargaining benefits that I get, that you all get, because every year you renegotiate your contracts and everybody gets a certain amount of a pay raise. I'm not going to pay dues, but I want that raise. What that does is that starves the UAW in that area for funding all of the things that it takes to properly, I guess, lobby for a better wage. I've never worked for a union company, so I don't know all of the details. But the whole point of that is that it allows a bunch of people to, well, why would I pay extra if I can still get the benefits? And once that number hits a tipping point, there's not enough people paying, and the union effectively loses its ability to properly lobby and protest and walk out to get better pay. And so the right to work thing, it's a big deal, but it really comes down to, it's just another way that since the big deal, since LBJ's big deal, the New Deal, that we essentially, the corporate people in this country decided, listen, we've got to fight back against this unionization and this socialist programming. And so ever since the 60s and 70s, they've been cutting and slicing and chopping away at union power and these social programs. And I mean, you can look at it just consistently since then, and it's a real big deal. And I would assume that the southern states are a little bit ahead of the curve, because we just recently did the right to work. But it's dangerous, man. Like, there's no way you can protect yourself if you can't unionize.
Yeah. Another one of the proposals on the budget, and this one we could talk about because this one's a little different. It's called Clean Michigan Government Initiative. And at first I was like, ooh, I'm excited because we're going to get clean water. That way Zach can move up and hang out with us. But no, it's definitely not that.
This has got to be a swamp drainer.
Oh, yes.
Is that what it is?
Yes, it's a 10-point plan. And it's kind of funny because it says 10-point plan. And then I think of, some of these, shows I watch. And it reminds me of like Parks and Rec where, Leslie comes out and she's like, I got a 25-point plan. I've got, 17 binders. That's what this reminds me of. But
this is my Maslow's hierarchy guarantee.
Yeah, exactly. So they say the first thing they want to do is make legislators part-time. I don't know if I agree with that, but okay, so let's just fine. They want to move them to no more than 90 days unless there's an emergency. Yeah. The second point, though, is that they're going to cut their pay to equal what an educator gets. So unless you want to pay teachers more, you can no longer pay legislators outrageous prices. So
that is awesome.
So they say the average teacher pay is $61,875. So they work 180 days a year. I would think that's actually an incorrect average pay, but whatever. We'll just go with it. They propose
maybe including university professors as well.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's probably it. And you got to think maybe it's including their health insurance. I don't know, right? Yeah. So they propose
that's more than I get. That's a pretty good life, but
yeah, okay. They propose to cut teacher pay, or not teacher pay. I'm sorry. They propose to cut legislator pay to equal what the average teacher makes. So if the legislators are only in session for 90 days, which is what their first point was, they only get paid roughly $31,000 a year. That's it. It's no longer a career for them. They can't do that and then spend the rest of their time doing whatever they want. And we could look up. They don't say in here exactly how much an average legislator makes, but I think that would be a good point to look up. They then talk about banning taxpayer-funded pensions and retirement healthcare for legislators. So that cuts. This is a across the board policy for both. Yeah. Walking across the aisle. You're cutting taxes right there, right? They want to stop the revolving door of lobbying, which was the second highlight for me. Yeah. They want to talk about transparency in lawmaking, that all amendments to bills be placed on the legislator's public website for at least 1 day before it goes to vote. Okay. That's not happening, right?
Real quick, just to bring it back to the average pay. I'm going through the list. California is $100,000 a year, Alabama 46, Delaware 45, Kentucky $188 a day, and so it basically depends on how many a year. Iowa's $25,000 a year. Michigan is $71,685 a year. That's $10,000 higher than what they claim is the average teacher pay. So they would be looking at a $10,000 loss in pay.
Plus, if they reduce the amount of days, they would get paid even less. And this is you think because think about it.
It just says that it's just a set year expense allowance. So you essentially get $71,000 a year as long as you just come to Congress and legislature all year long.
Yep. And so they're proposing to decrease that to 31 and have them work less days.
Okay, that's fine.
So, but if they did keep the same days, they would get paid 61 instead of 70. Whatever you said, So there's other things in there, and we won't go into all of it today. But I think that's one of the important things that everybody should check out, because again, that's kind of an across the aisle, right? It's like, how do we reduce government spending? Well, here's a great way. Oh, and by the way, by reducing government spending, we could also, on top of that, start limiting these terms. We could start getting people who care about politics in here and don't want to make it a career. For example, my piece of crap, uncle-in-law or whatever you want to call him, he's not in it for the money. He's probably one that would continue to run because his personal religious beliefs tell him he should come in and dictate to everybody, right? What they should be able to do and not do, and everybody should be a Christian and white. That's what he wants. And so this helps get some of the bigger money out of the lobbying side of it out of the candidate's pocket and allows for us to get people who want to come run to run. Now, the only thing I'm afraid of, right, is that you're going to get candidates that may be in the upper class almost constantly. And this
that can afford to run?
Yes. Yeah. Can you afford to leave work for 90 days a year, right? Yes. Okay, well, if you can do that because you own your own business, this may be, in fairness, a harm to our government. I don't know.
Well, what do we currently have though? Like the people who do run for office, they're 100% from that. I have the ability to not work for a year and campaign the whole time. Like it really is right now. It's set up. So like I would assume, Zach, you probably have the same kind of thing. It's like the people that you see running for office aren't going to be the same kind of people that you're going to see down in the streets and hanging out. Like the whole New York thing, or the whole Texas thing that's going on with Beto O'Rourke, like the whole type of thing, like an average guy who's just down in the I guess in the real world. That's not what you see when you have people running for your representatives in the House, because in Michigan we don't.
Yeah, I kind of have this concept of if you work for the government, then they kind of own you. Like if you leave office and you become like a lobbyist, then the government gets that money. Like if you're a former president, you should just get the salary they give you. And if you make money doing speeches and stuff, that should go to the government. Just like you shouldn't get rich. You shouldn't go, oh, I'm getting in the government to get rich. But that seems to be the path everybody's taking. Like, well, I'll just run for office for a while and then I'll become a lobbyist, or I'll just get myself a nice big fat tax cut while I'm in office.
Well, you get your health care.
I mean, Paul Ryan's like a few years older than me, and he's like, I'm retiring because he's set. He knows.
Yeah, they have health care. They have
big bucks the rest of his life.
They have health care and security for the rest of their lives. They don't get a salary as far as I know, but like you talk about like the wealth increasing that you get from being president. The Clintons gain millions and millions of dollars after being president from speeches. Bill Clinton gets something like $400,000 a speech. Hillary is in the same general. President Obama, as far as I know, he's in the same reign. There's a couple of speeches that he's supposed to be giving in Europe that are almost $500,000 a piece, and it's a big deal. And there's security and healthcare and all kinds of things that are covered and that kind of stuff. And people are just you're enriching yourselves with the position that you had. And Donald Trump is accused of that on a regular basis. But he's doing it in a different way. He's essentially removing a lot of the restrictions that billionaires need to make more money from their money, which I don't know. He's already rich before he came into office. And so like it's no surprise he's trying to remove the things that keep him from being richer. But when it comes to like the local elections, the local people, so like Chris and I have had two really awesome people. We had Dennis Murphy, who ran against one of the guys that is a complete piece of garbage in our Congress, and then we also had one of the local ministers who is part of this. I don't know. He's part of one of the most progressive and inclusive ministries. I don't know. It's hard to really nail down what his belief system is, but it's I would say it's kind of like Unitarian. He's Christian, but it's really inclusive. Anyways, we had him on, and he ran in the primary. He ended up losing to a woman who's going to be running against. There was Justin Amash and Bill Huizenga are the two representatives of the Republicans that they're running against, and they're both horrible. So even the people that that they're working their way up to go up against the Republicans, we're still supporting them, even though most of the people that we have supported in the past haven't been winning. But like the people that are in those places, like they're locally rich, but they're not nationally rich. They're not Donald Trump rich. And even when they're done with office, like they get into really good positions, but they may get something really exclusive or financially powerful in the local areas in the region, but they're not going to be national leaders or whatever, kind of like Congress and the Senate. Like if you finish a term in the Senate or in the House, like Paul Ryan, you're going to get an executive CEO position, COO position, CFO position at we're talking $1 billion a year, multi-billion-dollar a year corporation, because you have ties, connections, and power. And that's an enrichment that happens. And so like there's like that lobbyist thing, but also that that leadership thing that really boosts through. So like Paul Ryan will never want or question for money, and he's pretty young. And what we're trying to do is trying to change that a little bit. So like Chris was kind of sort of tucking against the whole idea of like the career politician or whatever. And this is something that's changed a little bit for me, is that stopping some of the career politicians might not be the worst idea. The reason, or the best idea, is because that the more you're in office, you learn a little bit more as to how to properly create these laws. If you create turnover, so every 2 or 4 years you have a new person in office, you have completely inexperienced people on average, and you have a lot of battles and nothing really happens. That's why the House is so ineffective. The Senate is much more effective, because the people in the Senate are usually there for a long time, and the House churns in and out. So I'm worried about some of these major changes to the local elections. They have people in and out, going back and forth, and I don't feel as bad as I used to about people that are in office for a long time.
Exactly. Speaking of being in office, Zach, make sure you plug everywhere everybody can find you.
Well, I am technically in an office because it's where I record my show. So the Zachrilegecast, Zachrilege, and I can spell it after 2 beers, so can you. So at Zachrilege on Twitter, Zachrilegecast on Facebook. I'm also on YouTube, and it's approximately every week I do an interview. I'm doing one tomorrow, bringing my friend Jeannie on, and we're going to talk about the podcast, the RFK tapes, and all the conspiracies regarding the RFK assassination. And I'm also very excited because next week I'm going to have Aaron Ra on my show, so that'll be a good one.
That sounds
He's
fun.
so much fun.
A lot of research to do to get
to get ahead.
Reading his books and all of his YouTube stuff, and the fact that he ran for office. Speaking of office running, and
Did he win?
he likes dark beer. I don't believe so.
I was going to say, because like my assumption is I heard that he'd even run as a Republican, as a conservative, because he was like, there's no way you can win as a Democrat, which is surprising.
Yeah, that is extremely very surprising that he would run like that. But I don't know. You might want to check your facts on that, Hannah. I don't know if that's the case.
I'm gonna have to look it up. I'm gonna have to
you
look
will.
it up. So
Well,
we'll post it on our Facebook or something so everyone can update.
Yeah. So anyway, Zach, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you on the show to provide some commentary and some unique perspective that we don't always get. We got to do these things more often. You have to come on more often, man.
Yeah, and I'll get you guys back on.
So.
It's nice to have the Chris's on.
Yeah, and we could get a little we could get a little more drunk than we did tonight. Maybe. I'm pretty sober tonight. I only had 2 drinks, actually.
Up to you.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you, Zach, for special guest hosting with us. Make sure everybody goes over to his podcast and subscribes and check him out. We'll be back next week with another amazing episode. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker. CellarDoorSkeptics.com.